Okay, hi, and it's Les on it again with another tutorial, and we're really looking at bird photography. I say bird photography; the things that I'm actually going to do really apply to all images. And what we've got here is a picture, and it's not a fantastic picture, but it's quite nice subjects. So we've got a bearded reedling here, and in the background we've got a slightly out of focus goldfinch in the background there. So obviously this is the main character, and that's important to think. The first thing you need to do when you look at your image, and this is any image, is to analyse it, to look at it and say, okay, what's the distractions on there? What can I do to make it slightly better? I don't want it to look good, I want it to look fantastic. I want it to, I want to get the best out of every photo that I do. And I think that's what you need to do basically, is instead of processing hundreds of pictures and chucking them out on, on social media and whatever, is to concentrate on your good images and to get them looking correct. So the first thing, I'll look at it. What's distracting about it? Well, I've got this little white patch of bird poo down the corner there. Again, same thing on the right hand side. We've got a little bit of a twig or something on here that's just distracting. So basically it's all the white areas that are on the edge of the image or are not part of the actual subject. Also with a good picture, what you want is some separation between your subject and the rest of the image. So we've actually got that because I've used the focus, so I've got the goldfinch out of focus. But I would like to emphasise that more. I want this to stand out, the bird here at the front. I want him to pull away from the background there. So those are the things we're going to work on. First of all, now I'm going to go to the layers. I'm going to right click on the layer. I'm going to duplicate the layer. So that's always the first thing I do. I'm protecting the original image. I can always come back to that original layer, and if anything goes wrong, I haven't got to restart. I've got the image ready to start again, basically. If we look at the tools on the left hand side here, what we're going to be using, and you may have any of these showing in this area, it's where you've got the spot healing tool. You notice when I press down on that and keep the mouse button down, it reveals other tools. So any of the buttons there with that little triangle in the corner will reveal the other tools. And I'm going to be using the patch tool. I'm going to be using this for two reasons. Basically, the patch tool, we need to look first of all at the options bar at the top, because this is important. So the first one there is to make a new selection, and we need that to be inserted. And also we need to make sure that we've got source selected, so that one's pressed, and we haven't got destination. And I'll explain that as we go along. So I'm going to be talking about using source. Now, just as a quick example, I'm going to get rid of this here. And we'll be doing this again in a moment. So I'm just going to drag over there. So I'll make a selection around it. And I'll put the mouse within that area. And I'll drag to an area where it's going to copy the texture to that part. Now it blends it in. It isn't like a clone tool. It blends part of that in. So if I right click now and press deselect, you can see that we've got rid of that. And we can do that in all these little areas. Now where you've got to be careful is on an edge, because when you get on an edge it can cause a few little problems, and we'll have a look at that later. Okay, so that's how we can get rid of those little distractions. But what about if I wanted to bring just a little bit more focus back to that area? So in other words, I wanted some of the texture. Well, I can do that if I just go to here and I make a little selection there, and then I'll drag this to an area where I've got some texture that I want. You'll see it will blend it in, and I've got that texture there on the twig. So I'm just going to do few little areas and use this area up here to get that texture that I want. And now what I'm doing is I'm bringing a little bit of focus back into this area, You've got to be careful you don't do it too big and you go wrong. I've done that too big there, so that's going to cause a problem there. Look, but all I've got to do is just drag around that part and do that. So that's how you can get a little bit of focus back there, a little bit of texture back into an area. Now this looks a little bit soft there, so we'll do that as well. You wouldn't do that all the time, but it's a technique you can use. Okay, so having done that, let's just look now at the separation. Oh, we've got a few other parts, sorry. Let's just do the other parts, so we'll use that tool again. Now this part here, I've got to be careful, because when you're on the edge of a line, when I drag this, look, I can actually see, can you see, if you're looking in this box there, what you need to do is to line up another edge so that it just doesn't blur and create a nasty edge on there, because it does sometimes blur. If you select something that hasn't got that same line on as such, you'll get like a blurred effect, which you can correct after. But if you just realise that, you can avoid it. So just these little white areas here and this part. So I'm just drawing around, making a selection, deselect. So straight away we've done that. Maybe this little area here, I'm going to neaten that up later on anyway, so that's not too much of a problem. Okay, so that's the main thing done. Let's just now concentrate on, I want to darken this bird here just a little bit so this one stands out more, and to do that we use the lasso tool, so the standard lasso tool. And on the options bar you can be on new selection. I usually go to add to selection, which is the second choice on the options bar there. Make sure you've got anti-alias on there, but the feather is the important bit. Now this is a bit of trial and error really. The feather will give a soft edge, so I've got quite a big picture here. I don't want it to be too harsh, so I'm going to type in 60 px in that box. So that will feather the edge of the selection. Instead of being hard, it will be nice and soft. And I'm going to draw over this, but I'm not going to get too close because I have got that quite large feather on the edge of the selection. So I'm going to be inside of this goldfinch, and I just want to do around there like that. So you don't have to be an artist, it's just very rough. And now because I'm on add, if I just want to add this, I might come in just a little bit there and a little bit here. I can add to it because I've got add to selection on the options bar. Okay, so now I go to the adjustments and I'm going to use the curves. So it's adjustments curves, and I click on there and I go to the middle and I click to put a point on there, and I drag that down slightly, doesn't got to be a lot, and just bringing it down that little bit, and we can now see we've got more separation. We're seeing our subject nice and bright, and we've diffused that bird that little bit more, although he's out of focus. We've now took that light down, so now we've got that. So we're taking away once again all the distractions. Now at this point what I'm going to do, so we're going to merge these two layers together. So we click on the top one, we hold down the shift key on the keyboard. Please ignore the bird in the background. I need these bird noises just to make it look good. I have a pair of crazy lovebirds in the background. Okay, so we click on the top layer, we hold down the shift key, we click on the layer below, and that highlights the two, and then we right click anywhere on either of those two and we click on merge layers. So we've still got our original underneath that. That's the original. That is now what we've got. Okay, now the next stage will require a Photoshop action that most of my students have already got, and if they haven't, then you'll need to contact me. For those who do the hide shoots, all these lessons will be provided free if you shoot in our hide, which is where this was taken, in the Avery hide. So if you haven't got that action, then you'll have to get in touch with me, or you'll get it through being in the group or whatever. And it's what we're going to use is something called frequency separation. So I've created my own action for frequency separation, and it will help us get rid, first of all, this shadow. Now, it looks quite a natural photo, but at the background there is some green fencing. In this shot, we don't usually keep the fencing up when we do the shoots, we usually take it down, but it's being kept up. But it looks okay, it looks fine, it looks quite natural. But what gives it away is this shadow here that's being caused, so you wouldn't get a shadow, obviously, if that was diffusing into the background. So we're going to use it to take away this shadow. And what frequency separation does is it takes away the texture from the actual basic colours, or the pixels that make up the image. So all the sharpness goes onto one layer with the texture on there, and the colours of the image goes onto another layer, and that means we can either manipulate just the texture, or we can manipulate just the colours of the image. So you'll see as I go along how I actually do that. So first of all, I need to play my action, make sure I'm on the top layer. There we go. Click on actions, and it's called FS2, and I click on there, and I click play on the actions, and that will basically do a shortcut of all the processes that's involved in creating this. So it just means that you don't have to do it all. I've done all the hard work for you. And the first thing that comes up with this median. I'm not going to go too much into that because I've done other lessons on this, but basically leave it as it is. Just click on OK. In 9 times out of 10 it's fine for most things on that setting. And then I'm going to look at the layers, and you'll see things have changed. We've now got a folder called FS2, and we've got a high layer, a paint layer, a low layer, and then underneath we've still got our other layers that we've created there. And you'll notice that you're on the paint layer. Now when you play this, it automatically turns on the tool, and the tool that it turns on is this one that you'll see up here. You see that one? And you'll see that that's the mixer brush tool. Yeah. And also you've got the settings up here. Now it should automatically put the settings up, but let's just make sure that they're correct. So as you go along the options bar, don't worry about the size. This should look should look clear. And then you've got 2 buttons, and the first one shouldn't be depressed. And the second one should be depressed. And what that means is when that's depressed, it cleans the brush after every use. Otherwise it picks up the colour pixels and spreads them around. So that must be on. The wet is on 75, the load is on 100, the mix is on 100, and the flow is on 100. Okay, so make sure you've got those settings applied when you use it, and I say you should have. Now you can see that we're actually on this layer. Now what I'm going to do, and this is really good idea to do, because obviously if you're using it for your first time you could be going wrong. So I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to right click and duplicate that layer. And then I'm going to explain it a little bit. So on here we have got the paint, if you want to look like that. We have got the colour. Above that we've got on the high layer. The high layer is the layer that contains the texture. So the sharpness in the image. If I turn that off, you'll see, if you look at the bird's eye, see it's all gone when I turn it off. So that contains the texture. This paint copy now we've got contains, and you can have as many of those as you want. So if you want to practice and you may go wrong, always duplicate that layer before you start editing it. Okay, so we make sure we're on the right layer. And now I'm going to resize the brush. Now I'm going to use this using the keyboard. So to the left of your enter key, you've got the 2 parenthesis or square bracket keys. And the one on the right, if you tap that, will make your brush bigger. It's just much quicker than going up here and changing the size of the brush. And you can see basically the size that you're getting. It's reasonably large. And the way this works is it doesn't paint. It pushes the pixels that are already there about. And because we've got the texture above, it's not going to alter the texture, it's just going to push the colours around. So all I'm going to do is I'm dragging from here to here, and I'm dragging this colour from here over to this area. Now this is using the brush quite crudely, and you'll practice and you'll get better at it. And I can now mix these pixels up. I'm just holding the brush down and squiggling it around a little bit just to mix the colours up. You haven't got to be great at painting. Don't worry if you go slightly over the edge. As long as it's slight, it won't really do too much damage. You can always click on undo as well. If you just go to the edge there, because it's quite dark, it's not going to affect that at all. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to brush out this area because that's quite soft. There's no texture in this area, so I'm going to take down the size of the brush a bit. And I'm just going to brush this out. So I'm not deleting it or painting over it. I'm moving pixels around, and pushing pixels around is much better and gives a much more realistic approach than using just a basic image and using the clone tool or any of the other tools, because we're not moving the textures that are on the image, we're just moving part of it. We can move the texture if we want, we can do things with the texture, we can work on the high layer and get texture. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I'm just going to do this little area here as well. Just going to take that bit in there. And I'm just going to do the bottom of this stick. Just the bottom. So I'm just being a little bit more careful here. Bringing the paint down. Pushing those pixels about till I get to there. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to that tool that we used earlier, which is the patch tool. And I'm going to click. I'm just going to do a little bit at a time with it. So I'm going to go there first and drag it to there, because if it was too big, I'd have problems getting to an area that's blank. So I'm just going a little bit at a time. Right click, deselect. Don't worry if you've got little, artifacts on there, because we can then go back to the mixer brush and put that right. So I'm just right clicking, deselecting. Right, and I'll just touch it all, go back to the mixer brush, and I'll just touch that up a little bit. And there we go. I think we're more or less there now. Just do these bits down here. Touching up that I'm not happy with, maybe a bit in between the tail there. And there we have the completed image. So I'm just going to flatten that now. Layout, flatten image. So never settle for second best. If you've got an image, you can 9 times out of 10 make it better. So let me just, I've done this before, so I'm just going to go back to Lightroom now. If I open Lightroom up, I should have that image. Okay, so there's the before, there's the completed image. Before and after. And you can see what a big improvement that is. So it's just taking your time, analysing your pictures, looking at your original picture and saying, these are the things I need to know, and I need to get rid of these white areas, they're distractions in the corner there. Really analyse, this is a distraction. Yeah, we got the shadow. Where can we get rid of shadow? So we've done all that using those tools. Okay, I hope that helps you all. That's all from me.